Good morning, everybody, and welcome. And I'd like to begin with what we call a confession of faults. That is when you mess up, if you know what I mean. Anyway, sometime since Sunday, I read those readings from Mass, and I was probably tired because the last few days have been a little bit hectic. I read them, and I said, they're the same old readings we've heard so often. They don't have that much to say to us. And consequently, I ignored them. And I preached yesterday evening at Mass, and I completely ignored those readings and went on my own topic, whatever it happened to be. And then this morning, I had the 8 o'clock Mass, and about 6:45, I said, I better read those readings again just to see what they have to say. And you ever like that? All of a sudden, I realized those are powerful readings. How could I possibly ignore them? So I had to change from what I said last night completely, okay? And it goes something like this: in order to understand those readings, Father Henry and myself, at a particular point in time, I think it was like the 80. Somebody's going to have to be quiet for a few moments, otherwise we can't go on. Okay, we'll start again. Well, dear kid, if you start yelling at me, I'm going to yell back at you, okay? So, but you might want to consider taking her out into the foyer, which will be quiet and give us a little bit more space. Thank you. So where was I? Okay, so I had to change my sermon from last night to something completely different. But to give you sort of an insight into what today's readings are about, I mean, they're really about the relationship between parents and children and what that might mean in your life. And I was going to give you an example, and that is Father Henry here and myself. On the 18th of August, 1968, we found ourselves with his brother. We found ourselves at the airport in Dublin, saying goodbye to our parents. We were headed for the United States. And we were feeling, obviously, knowing that this was it, okay? This is our mission. So needless to say, even though we're excited, we're also very anxious about the future. So anyhow, that was our side of the story. But our parents were there, my parents and his parents. And for them, it was sort of letting go of their children, and knowing that things could never be exactly the same again. And that's a reality which I'm sure some of you have experienced at different points in time. So if you keep that in mind, that kind of, am I right? Okay, all right. He agrees with me. If you keep that in mind, then I take you to the readings today. And the first reading, which is Samuel in the Old Testament. Samuel's mother, was praying for years for a baby. And in Old Testament times, not to get pregnant was regarded as, it was almost like you weren't human, almost. So she prayed and she prayed and she prayed and she prayed. And eventually, she went to the sanctuary at one stage, and she says, if I have a baby, I'm going to dedicate that child to the Lord. So lo and behold, sometime later, she had a baby, and she nursed the baby, and then she went back to Shiloh, to the sanctuary in Shiloh, and to the priest who was there, Eli. She presented this baby to him and says, this baby is for the Lord. So in other words, for her, it was completely letting go of her child. So that from that time onwards, he was no longer hers. how difficult that must have been. But it's so easy to read that reading and just sort of pass over as if it has nothing whatsoever to say to us. And then we go to the gospel reading today, and again, it's a familiar story. And Jesus and Joseph and Mary taking Jesus up into the temple. He was 12 years of age at the time. And they were there for a day or two, and then they decide to go home. But in going home, they discover that the baby, the child, is not with them. And so they become frantic. Imagine losing your child. Like Jerusalem would have been quite a journey from their home. So they're frantic, looking for the child. And they spend 3 days doing that, looking for the child. And eventually, they find the child in the temple. It says, talking and discussing with the doctors of the law. And the mother, of course, being frantic at that stage, she says, son, she says, why? Why did you do this to us? We have spent the last 3 days searching for you. And his response, and it almost seems a little trite, he said to her, did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? In other words, I have a mission to complete. And for that reason, I have to leave you behind. How difficult that must have been for Joseph and Mary, letting go of the 12-year-old Jesus, knowing that from that time onwards, he was theirs on the one hand, but on the other hand, he was involved with the world in a completely new way. So some of you may have similar experiences in your own life. Last week, I had a funeral service here for a 19-year-old who was killed in a car crash. And I just felt, what must it be like as a parent to lose a child, let go of a child at the age of 19? So these readings I really would encourage you to read them again for yourselves. They're so powerful and so very human. But it's so easy to say, well, it's just stuff, okay? It has nothing to say to me. I think it has a lot to say to you and to me. And thank God for the fact that even though we have to let go, that God is always in charge. And also know further, I always assumed that as children, that our relationship with the parent was very strong. What I didn't realize was that the relationship of the parent for the child, they sort of from the top down, can be even much stronger. And that mothers in particular have that kind of ongoing relationship with their child. So even though the child sometimes, as an adult, may forget about his mother, but you can be quite sure that the mother never forgets him. So powerful readings. Please take them to heart and know that as you do so, that as you attempt to live out your commitment in life, know that the Lord is going to be with you every step along the way. Amen.